Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rona. Let me introduce and recognize Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, very much. Dr. Kahl, I have a few questions for you today regarding some of your previous positions and statements that have caught my attention leading up to today's hearings, and you've heard from some of my colleagues that had similar concerns. Dr. Kahl, you are nominated to an important position, and that position is Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. And while everyone's world outlook and views on national security matter when it comes to the Department of Defense, your core beliefs and internal working philosophy are central to the position that you are seeking. And to be blunt, Dr. Kahl, your social media and other commentary over recent years, not just a handful of months, but years, provides a concerning outlook to me. And this is especially true when it comes to Iran. In one tweet, you pushed the idea that pushing for more inspections of Iran's nuclear sites is just an effort to destroy the Iran deal. You further push that the Trump administration's Iran strategy as efforts to, quote, justify war, end quote, and to, quote, bait Iran into restarting its nuclear program. So, Mr. Kahl, do you stand by your assessment that the Trump administration was baiting Iran into restarting its nuclear program?
Well, thank you, Senator. My concern with the maximum pressure campaign was largely that it would have two consequences. One is that it would encourage Iran to reaccelerate its nuclear program, and two, that it would encourage Iran to try to generate counter leverage by increasing their provocations in the region. Both of those things have happened in the last 3 years. Iran is a lot closer to the fissile material required for a nuclear weapon than they were at the end of the Obama administration. And we've seen more attacks against our forces in Iraq. We've seen attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. We've seen more drone attacks and missile attacks on Saudi Arabia. So I'm clear-eyed about the threat that Iran poses, but it was not clear to me that the Trump administration's approach was having the effect that President Trump and Secretary Pompeo and others were hoping for.
And I would counter as well that the JCPOA, I don't believe, stopped any further development of Iran as it made its way towards to nuclear capabilities. Mr. Kahl, do you still stand by your assessment that the $100 billion released to Iran through the Iranian deal was being used for domestic investment? I think at that time you had said that, quote, most of it will go to butter, end quote.
So I'm not privy to the classified assessments on this. All I know is that the DIA testified in 2017 that the majority of the sanctions relief from the JCPOA went to domestic purposes. You may be privy to information that contradicts that. I am not. I do know that, unfortunately, as we've reimposed sanctions as a part of the maximum pressure campaign, it hasn't had the effect of drying up Iranian resources for its support for its missile program, its conventional weaponry, its support for terrorism. So I think we need to do both. I think we need to address the nuclear program and address these other destabilizing activities.
Well, $100 billion is a lot for butter. Do you believe it to be plausible that some of that $100 billion could have gone to Iran's proxy terrorist forces that perhaps targeted some of our allies as well as American forces?
It's completely conceivable. I will say that the Trump administration in 2018, I believe, released an estimate that between 2012 and 2018, Iran spent about $2 to $3 billion a year supporting its proxies around the Middle East. The sad reality is it's just not very expensive for them to do it. And so it is a huge problem for us, but one that unfortunately doesn't require a lot of resources for Iran to carry out.
Mm-hmm. Which is true. That is very true, that it is very unfortunate. So admittedly, you and I do come from starkly different places on Iran. I think the Obama policy on Iran was a naive approach, and the Iran deal was a failed policy that made us more vulnerable. And in recent years, I do think those concerns have been proven to be legitimate. For more than 4 decades, Iran and the terrorist organizations it funds have targeted American civilians and military personnel, as well as our partners and allies, and we know that they will continue to be a prominent state sponsor of terrorism, not just across the Middle East, but cultivating different operating networks around our globe. I know my time is expired. I'll just make one final comment. We've mentioned the tweets. A number of my colleagues have. There's one that will demonstrate my thoughts today, where you tweeted that if Bolton replaces McMaster, we are all going to die. And I think that this demonstrates that these exaggerated views and incendiary remarks are not what we are looking for in someone that will serve advising policy within the Department of Defense. I served in uniform in the Middle East. I have a daughter that's on track to serve in our great Army in just a little over a year. And I will not be supporting your nomination because I believe that my daughter, her colleagues, the other young men and women that are choosing to serve in our armed forces deserve someone that will take a serious outlook to policy and not put this kind of garbage out in front of the American public. Thank you, Mr. Chair.